At my dad's birthday dinner, my husband calmly announced he was leaving me for my younger sister. I just smiled, lifted my phone, and said, "Can you all open the message I just sent?" In the space of one breath, every fork froze midair. My mother's mouth stayed open. My father stopped cutting his steak. My sister Lena's hand was still laced with my husband Ethan's under the table. They thought they were about to control the whole story. They had no idea I'd spent 6 months preparing to burn their script to the ground. Before I tell you how that night exploded, let me introduce myself properly. My name is Naomi Ellis. I work in cybercrime and digital forensics. In plain English, people hire me to untangle lies hidden in phones, laptops, and cloud accounts. I reconstruct timelines, follow data crumbs, and expose secrets. I never imagined my most complicated case would be my own marriage. Where are you watching from right now? If you feel comfortable, drop your city or country below. I'd love to see how far this story travels. I met Ethan 8 years before that dinner. He was a pediatric anesthesiologist, soft-spoken, patient, and impossibly gentle with scared kids. The first time I saw him, he was kneeling on the floor of a hospital playroom in a suit, letting a little boy check his heartbeat with a toy stethoscope. You know those rare moments when someone's kindness feels almost unreal? That was him. Or at least, that's who I thought he was. We bumped into each other again at a hospital fundraiser. While everyone else chased donors, he spent half the night listening to a teenage girl talk about missing her prom because of surgery. I was there because my firm had just landed a contract auditing the hospital's systems. We talked about nothing and everything until they turned the light. A year later, we stood under a string of fairy lights in my parents' backyard, promising forever in front of that crooked maple tree I used to climb as a kid. The first few years honestly felt like a movie. We bought a small Craftsman on a quiet street and spent our weekends covered in paint dust, arguing over hardware finishes and laughing until we cried. Ethan worked brutal hours, but he always tried to be present. On one particularly awful week, my case had fallen apart, my manager was on my back. I came home ready to collapse. Instead of darkness, I found our living room turned into a makeshift cinema. He'd hung a white sheet on the wall, ordered my favorite Thai takeout, and set up an old projector with a playlist of my comfort movies. We ate spring rolls on the floor while he made up ridiculous alternate endings. For a long time, I held on to that memory like proof. Proof that what came later couldn't be real. Looking back, that's the worst part of betrayal, isn't it? Realizing some of it was actually good. My younger sister Lena blew into our lives 3 years before it all imploded. Where I was methodical and scheduled, she was restless and impulsive. She tried on cities like outfits, Austin, Seattle, New Orleans, and burned through majors and boyfriends like kindling. One rainy night, she called me from a bus station, sobbing. Another job fallen apart. Savings gone. No plan. Just come home, I told her. Stay with us a little until you figure things out. When I mentioned it to Ethan, he paused mid-page over his medical journal. You're sure? He asked. Having someone stay long-term, it'll change the feel of the house. Did that hesitation mean anything? Or was it just a normal concern I later weaponized in my memory? I still don't know. I told him, she's my sister. I can't let her sleep at a bus station. He smiled, squeezed my hand, and said, then we'll make room. 2 months turned into 6. Lena found a job in a local gallery, but every time I gently raised the issue of her moving, she'd say, I'm saving. Rent's insane here. Just a few more weeks, okay? At first, it was actually fun. We cooked together, stayed up too late retelling childhood stories, turned grocery runs into mini adventures. The house buzzed in a way it hadn't before. But slowly, so slowly I almost missed it, things shifted. Ethan and Lena began to share jokes I wasn't part of. Quick glances across the table, tiny bursts of laughter that died when I walked into the room. She started volunteering to drop something at the hospital for him. She'd come back flushed, smelling faintly of his cologne. Have you ever dismissed your own discomfort because you were scared of what it might mean? My best friend Tasha didn't dismiss it. One lunch, I answered Ethan's phone he'd left in my car. Lena's name lit up the screen for the third time that morning. Just a question about a recipe, she said. After I hung up, Tasha raised an eyebrow. Naomi, that's weird, she said. Your sister calling your husband more than she calls you? I rolled my eyes. They just get along. It's nice. Nice has limits, she muttered. I told myself jealousy didn't suit me. I trusted my husband. I loved my sister. Period. End of story. Except it wasn't. The truth arrived on a Tuesday night disguised as convenience. Ethan was supposedly on call. I was buried in a report when my phone died. Too tired to hunt for a charger, I grabbed Ethan's laptop to order delivery. His browser reopened to his personal email. I wasn't looking for anything. I was literally moving the cursor toward the close button when a subject line near the top caught my eye. About last night, from Lena. My brain tried to protect me. Probably something harmless. They'd watched a movie. Talked about mom. Anything. I clicked. In 3 sentences, my life split into before and after. She described his hands on her, the way he'd kissed her, how she could still feel him everywhere. Ethan's reply sat right beneath, telling her they needed to be more cautious because he didn't want to hurt Naomi. I read the thread backwards, further and further, my vision tunneling. These weren't new messages. They went back almost 2 years. Long before she ever needed a place to stay. Long before I invited her into my home thinking I was rescuing her. Every late emergency case, every errand Lena ran that took 3 hours, suddenly lined up like a grim little parade. Have you ever had reality rearrange itself in front of your eyes? When Ethan came home that night, he kissed my forehead, asked about my day, made himself tea like nothing had changed. He had no idea his marriage had just died on his own laptop screen. I answered automatically, watched him move through our kitchen like a stranger wearing my husband's face. That's when another part of me, my professional self, stepped in. If this were a case, I wouldn't scream at a suspect. Ide gata proof. Build a timeline. Make it airtight. So that's what I did. The next couple of months felt like living in a split screen. On one side, I went to work, cooked dinner, laughed at my dad's jokes. On the other, I tracked, documented, observed. I noticed a midweek charge on our joint card at a boutique hotel I'd walked past downtown, the kind with velvet couches in the lobby and overpriced cocktails. Ethan had claimed to be stuck in surgeries that entire day. I screenshotted the statement. I re-enabled location sharing for safety, something we'd done years earlier and forgotten. When he texted that he was staying late to assist with a tricky case, his little sat parked outside Lena's new apartment. I logged it in a spreadsheet: time, date, message, location. My evidence folder grew. Photos of them slipping into that same hotel on a weekend he swore he was at a medical conference. Messages where Lena used "helping mom" as a cover story to disappear with him. The more I saw, the colder I became. Shock hardened into something else. Not rage yet, strategy. One night on our porch swing, I tested him. The air was soft, his shoulders slumped after a long shift, wine loose in his hand. Perfect conditions for truth, right? I feel like you and Lena have gotten very close, I said, my voice light. Is there anything I should know? For a split second, his eyes flashed raw panic. My heart actually leapt. Maybe he'd confess, apologize, end this with some shred of dignity. Instead, he slipped into a role I hadn't fully seen before. Naomi, that's unfair, he said quietly. She leans on me like a brother-in-law. If you're feeling insecure, we should talk about why. He turned my suspicion into a flaw, into something broken in me. Classic gaslighting, textbook perfect. I've testified about that pattern in courtrooms. Sitting there, I almost doubted my folder of evidence. Almost. Have you ever had someone lie so smoothly you started to mistrust your own eyes? I played along. Yeah, you're right. Maybe I'm just tired, I said, letting him believe he'd won. His response was to hold me tighter, promise we were solid, and then sneak off the next afternoon for another consult, GPS planted right back at Lena's building. My soft confrontation didn't scare them. It warned them. That's when they escalated. Lena started inviting me to sisters' days. Nails, brunch, wine tastings. She'd gush about how grateful she was that Ethan and I had saved her. At a gallery opening, she tried to introduce me to a single guest artist, pushing me toward him while laughing that I needed fun because Ethan worked too hard. The hypocrisy made my teeth ache. They even dragged my mother into their fantasy. One afternoon, Mom called, buzzing with excitement. Lena told me something, but I'm sworn to secrecy, she said. You're going to love your anniversary surprise. She and Ethan have been planning it together for months. Months. Meetings. Secrets. Using my mother as prop in their story. That was the moment my hurt turned into something sharper. They weren't just cheating. They were rewriting reality and assigning me the role of oblivious villain if I dared object. Ethan's final move before I detonated everything was almost impressive in its cruelty. One evening, I left a neat little stack of printed receipts and tame screenshots on the kitchen counter. Nothing too explicit, just enough to say, I know. Then I waited for war. Instead, he walked into the living room with a somber expression and a manila folder. I found something, he said, sounding pained. Inside were printed emails between me and a male coworker, Daniel. Only they weren't quite right. Sentences had been chopped, reordered, stripped of technical context to make them look flirtatious. I didn't want to believe it, he whispered. But this explains the distance between us. He was pre-building his alibi. Poor husband, pushed away by his unfaithful wife, comforted by her sister. He'd even photoshopped my life. That was when I understood. A private confrontation would never beat two people this committed to their lie. I needed to change the audience. The next day, after he nobly suggested we take a break and announced he'd be crashing at Lena's for a while, I took a personal day. While he packed his bags to move from my marriage bed to my sister's couch, I drove downtown. First stop, a private investigator a fellow analyst had once recommended, Derek Cole, retired cop with 3 decades of marital train wrecks under his belt. I slid my hard drive and printed timelines across his desk. He studied them, whistled low. Most people come in here with a bad feeling and a screenshot, he said. You brought me a prosecution file. What am I missing? I asked. Intent, he replied. Right now you can prove they slept together and lied. But the pattern, the planning, the financial stuff, that's what shows this wasn't some tragic accident. Second stop, a divorce attorney named Laura Martinez, known for being relentless but fair. She pored over my spreadsheets, hotel receipts, GPS logs, and Derek's notes. Legally, in this state, the affair itself doesn't give us much leverage, she said. But the hidden account Ethan opened with money siphoned from your joint savings? The loans he took from your father for investments, while quietly transferring your own money elsewhere? That matters. I hadn't seen that last part until she pointed it out. Together, we traced regular withdrawals disguised as house expenses, matching them to deposits into a separate account under his name only. He'd been quietly funding his escape, using both my salary and my father's generosity. The gut punch wasn't just that my husband and sister had slept together. It was realizing he'd stolen our future too. Then came the messages. Ethan had a habit most people have. He'd set his phone to back up everything to the cloud and then forgotten about it. I logged in one night with a password I'd watched him use for years. Inside was an unfiltered record of their affair, voice notes, photos, text threads they thought were private. One conversation burned itself into my memory. Ethan wrote something like, "Naomi's buried in reports. She wouldn't notice if we were in the next room." Lena replied, "She should thank us for making the hard choice. She was never really a wife, just a roommate with a laptop." I sat there alone in the dark, scrolling through joke after joke about my trust, my work, the way I fold laundry, the sound of my laugh. These weren't two people overcome by guilt and confusion. They were united in contempt. That night, whatever soft part of me still hoping for an apology finally died. From then on, I wasn't a heartbroken spouse. I was a forensic analyst working a case titled, simply, Exit. Right on cue, my mom texted about my dad's upcoming 65th birthday dinner. "Please come. Ethan and Lena already said yes. Don't make it awkward for your father." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I opened my laptop and began assembling something new. Not just a data dump, a narrative. I built tailored packets for each person who mattered. For my dad, who values integrity with money above almost anything, I compiled screenshots of the hidden account, the suspicious transfers, the dates Ethan had borrowed cash while secretly moving our savings. For my mom, who prides herself on loyalty and family closeness, I pulled messages where Lena used her as cover. Taking mom to the market actually meant 4 hours at a hotel. For my cousins and aunts, I laid out the timeline of lies told to each of them, the overlapping excuses, the conflicting stories. Then I put everything, every message, transaction, photo, and note, into one long, clear PDF with headings and dates. That was for me. My script, in case my hands shook or my brain fogged during what came next. On the morning of the dinner, I dressed with a calm that felt almost eerie. Simple navy dress Ethan always said made my eyes look brighter, pearl studs for my grandmother, hair pulled back. I looked like a woman going to a regular family gathering, not a woman who'd built a bomb out of truth. Lena texted me an hour before, "You're coming, right? Dad wants everyone there. Let's just be adults." That "let's" almost made me laugh. "I'll be there," I replied. When I walked into my parents' house carrying my dad's favorite lemon cake, the air smelled like roasted chicken and rosemary. Ethan and Lena sat side by side on the couch, not touching but angled toward each other in that subtle way couples do. I kissed my dad's cheek, hugged my mom, nodded at them. Ethan's eyes held rehearsed concern. Lena's face was all forced sympathy. Dinner was excruciatingly normal. Retirement plans, weather complaints, my cousin's new baby. Safe topics floating on the surface while a riptide churned underneath. Then my mom brought out dessert, and Ethan cleared his throat. I knew that sound. He'd used it to announce our engagement, his promotion, the house closing. I watched my family's faces shift into polite attention. "I have something difficult to share," he began, sliding his hand toward Lena's under the table. While he talked about growing apart and unexpected feelings, my phone buzzed in my lap. The scheduled emails I'd set earlier had bounced back with a server error. All that careful automation, gone. For a second, panic clawed up my throat. Without the digital trail, I was just a woman accusing her husband and sister of the worst thing imaginable. Easy to paint as hysterical. Then I remembered, I was the server. I didn't need automation. I had my phone and every email address in that room. By the time Ethan placed his hand on Lena's and announced that they'd fallen in love and didn't want to hide, I'd already attached my master file to a fresh message, blind copy to the entire family. Subject line, context for tonight. When he finished and silence sucked all the sound out of the room, I hit send. Then I set my phone face down and finally spoke. Before anyone responds, I said, "Could you all open what I just sent you?" For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then my cousin's phone chimed. Then my aunt's. Then my dad's. A chorus of beeps and vibrations. My cousin Daniel tapped his screen first. His brows shot up. "Oh," he exhaled under his breath. I sat very still, watching the realization spread like dye in water as each person scrolled. The hotel logs, the location history, the bank transfers, the texts full of contempt. "What is this?" Lena demanded, voice rising. "It's a timeline," I said calmly, "of the affair you and my husband have been having for the last 2 years. I didn't want anyone here to have to take my word over yours." "You hacked us," Ethan snapped. "I used devices and accounts you left open in our shared home," I replied, "and the joint accounts we signed for together. If you want to discuss digital privacy, we can. But we should probably start with ethical privacy first." My mother's hand trembled as she set down her phone. She looked from Ethan to Lena, her face crumpling. "Lena," she whispered. "Your own sister?" Lena's tears came instantly. "They always had. It just happened," she sobbed. "We didn't mean to hurt anyone." My cousin, still scrolling, shook his head. "This didn't just happen," he said. "You were plotting this for years. It's all right here." My father, usually the quiet one at family meals, stood up so suddenly his chair scraped. He fixed Ethan with a stare I'd never seen him use on anyone. "You borrowed money from me," he said slowly, holding up his phone, "while you were moving Naomi's earnings into a secret account to run off with her sister." "That right?" Ethan opened his mouth, searching for his next performance. "This is Naomi's version," he began. "She's clearly having a hard time." "Enough," my father cut in. "My daughter doesn't forge bank statements." "Sit down." There was nothing left for me to argue. The facts crowded the room. I stood, smoothing my dress. "Dad, I'm sorry your birthday dinner turned into this," I said. He stepped around the table, wrapping me in a hug so tight I almost broke. "You don't apologize for someone else's rot," he murmured. As I walked toward the door, my phone lit up with message after message, from cousins, aunts, even my grandmother, all variations of "I'm so sorry" and "we're with you." I turned it off. For the first time in half a year, I was done tracking anyone but myself. The next morning, I filed for divorce. No dramatic showdown in court. Ethan's lawyer saw the stack of evidence and advised settlement. Lena moved out of my parents' house under a storm of silence. My mother told her she needed space. A lot of it. 3 months later, I signed the final papers in Laura Martinez's office. She asked if I felt vindicated. I thought about it. "I feel clear," I said. "I know exactly what happened, and so does everyone who needed to." Truth doesn't erase pain, but it does stop you doubting yourself. I moved into a small apartment high enough that I could see the city lights. I bought furniture slowly, piece by piece, choosing only things I loved instead of things that matched what Ethan would have wanted. On my first night there, I opened the folder on my laptop named Exit. I hovered over it for a long time, then dragged it into the trash and emptied it. Not because the past didn't matter, but because I had documented it thoroughly enough to finally let it go. If you're still here with me, listening all the way to the end, thank you. Stories like this are heavy. If any part of mine feels familiar to you, I'm so sorry you know that feeling. Would you do me a favor? If this video helped you feel even a little less alone, tap like and let the algorithm know to share it. And if you want more stories and reflections like this, you're always welcome here at Winds of Thought. You can't control other people's choices, but you can control the story you accept about yourself. If you feel comfortable, tell me one thing you've survived that younger you thought would break you. I read as many comments as I can, and your words might be exactly what someone else needs to see today. Wherever you are and whatever you're carrying, remember, you are not crazy, you are not overreacting, and you deserve a life where the truth is not a weapon used against you, but a light you hold in your own hands.